We try,
great.
man. We
That's
try.
great.
Yeah, we try. We try. All right, excited to have lead play-by-play man for the USL. He was also the play-by-play announcer for the big San Jose match in the Open Cup about a week ago today, actually. It's Mike Watts. It's been a while since we've had you on, Mike. Good to see you.
Pleasure's all mine. It's been too long. Proud to hang out with my fellow quails.
You're one of the few guys who still drops the quails in
I
there.
can get away
That's
with
fantastic.
that, right?
1,000% you can, yes. Immediately you say quail, and everybody from Sacramento's like, we like this guy.
I thought it was the opposite. That's great.
No, it's not the opposite. Not the opposite. Well, man, you and Devin Kerr were on the call for the Open Cup game a week ago today. I just want to start what are your thoughts? What were your thoughts going into the game? Thoughts throughout? I know there's a lot in there.
Yeah. Wow. Look, I think coming into this, I'm really grateful I get a chance to somewhat cobble a schedule together. And the two games I wanted in this round ended up being the two on Tuesday that I did. I did Charleston, Atlanta. Knew Atlanta was banged up, and it was questionable what kind of team they put out. They'd have to go on the road. And end up being 0-0, going to penalties, and Charleston feels the pangs of penalty shootout defeat again. But the one I was really intrigued by, because you guys have seen San Jose so many times, 5 times in 10 years, 8 Open Cups, whatever it is, was this game. And familiarity, geographically, and you listen to Lucci Gonzalez, and he's like, yeah, we do care about winning this game. We do know it's a local rivalry. We do recognize this is a cup we haven't won in our 50 years of existence. We do need to deal with the fact that our schedule isn't exactly conducive and some of the injuries that they had around their roster, but they had every intention of coming to Sacramento and going for it. And so you kind of come in going like, okay, this is a down on their luck MLS team and a Sacramento team that is frankly built to win cup games. It just like it's perfectly built to win cup and playoff games. So coming in, I thought I had a pretty good idea of what it would look like. Kieran Phillips scores, and you're kind of like, all right, this has the flavor of what you need to get where you need to go. The Rodrigo Lopez injury, I went, I don't know if they come back from that in this game. Conceding at 100 minutes, I don't know that they can come back from that. There were a handful of times where genuinely it's just like it would take something really miraculous to win this game, given that they saved so many. I mean, they had a $6.5 million player come off the bench and impact the game, and you could tell his quality instantly. So, it just I always held out hope. My heart said, of course it's going to happen. My head kept kind of giving me the red flags. And luckily for all of us, what happened in that second period of extra time, I mean, I've called like 1,500 soccer matches, and that's going to be easily top 5, maybe at worst top 10, games that I've ever experienced. I mean, floating after that game, it was incredible.
Yeah, like the level of comeback from Sacramento, really 3 separate times. They go down 1-0, then they give up a late equalizer going into what, in the 80th-ish minute. And then they give it up in extra time, the 100th minute you mentioned. And I feel like each one of those times it was like, that might be it. That was kind of our chance. And every single time the Republic rallied. I wanted to ask, because you called the San Jose game 2 years ago in the 2022 Open Cup, 2-0 victory. Very different game. Obviously, those cup games are very stressful. But when Roro scored in, again, like the 80th minute, and you had a great call of that goal, it was kind of the nail in the coffin, and then Sacramento could celebrate. This is the exact opposite, where it was back and forth. And I made the case that if you compare this game to any of the 2022 Open Cup games, just the level of roller coaster of emotions put that game as number 1 for me in terms of how much craziness there was going on. Is that a fair case to make just because of the back and forth?
Oh man. Maybe the semi with the shootout.
That's
maybe.
what I said. Yeah.
Like the audacity for the Panenka. And I mean, you go right down the list of how wild that game felt in real time. And against a club that was in better form at the time too. But I mean, for my money, I mean, even with Rodrigo's son just getting out of the hospital, and I mean, like,
yeah,
the every ancillary storyline said that this was going to be a night for the underdog, which of course Rodrigo turned around and immediately said, we were favored.
I
Like,
know.
forget this underdog thing, which is a fair point, but obviously divisions give you structure. Kind of in the US. Yeah, I it's hard for me to say I've ever called an Open Cup game. I've called a lot. I've called like 55 Open Cup games, including that game with the Rodrigo stunner. And for me, this is probably the best I've ever called. My favorite game that I've ever called.
Wow.
In the Open Cup.
Wow. That's pretty unbelievable, I would say. I think, I mean, take me through the mindset in the second extra time. So in the building, as where I am, you can feel the energy die down after the third goal for San Jose. Crowd starts to get nervous. We tried to ramp them back up going into the second extra time. And then after the first goal, the place completely came back alive and was still celebrating the third goal going into the fourth goal because it was such in rapid fashion. But from your perspective, what are you feeling when Sacramento equalizes going up 3-3? What is going to your mind? Okay, this is going to Pens, or what's in your mind at that point?
Yeah, 1,000,000%. This is going to Pens.
Yeah.
And if you had Cicerone off the bench, or you had, the injuries that you guys have aren't necessarily as plentiful as some other teams, but they're as devastating as any team in the league right now. With Rodrigo, and you're just getting Herrera back, and Cicerone is, I mean, the sort of heartbeat of the attack there. I mean, you're kind of like, I don't know how they're going to manufacture another one, and then you forget that Pirano in cup games turns into Ronaldo, and all of a sudden, it all makes way more sense. So, yeah, I mean, all of a sudden, San Jose got a little weak on their feet, and like, credit to Sacramento, the staff and the players, for recognizing that moment, because in real time, I'm going, okay, you sucker punch them right out of the intermission in extra time. Great. But I don't know how comfortable I am that you're going to go get another one. And for them to be able to methodically get the ball from one side of the field to the other, open up Pirano for a cross, and then get that tap in from Herrera, I mean, electric. I was in the same boat as you guys, going, this one's over. How am I, how are you going to get back up? And then you get the first goal, and then you're like, all right, let's see this depends and see how we do. And then you get the second one. It's like, okay, don't implode,
Right.
personally or the club for that matter. So yeah, nuts, man.
Yeah, that's why I emailed you guys. I'm like, we got to have you on to talk about this, because that was one of the most incredible games I've ever seen, for sure, and just the back and forth aspect. I want to quickly jump into some of the future stuff. So Sacramento will host Seattle in the next round, and if they win that, Sacramento would host in the semis, getting another favorable draw, which is pretty remarkable. But what are your thoughts? I mean, we got a ton of time left until that game, over a month, but just kind of snapshot. What are your thoughts on Seattle, Sacramento? What are the things that we should keep our eyes on going into that match?
Yeah, for one, you talk about the draw, and every team talks about that. I had another MLS coach go, if we've been drawn at X team, I don't think I'm putting any of these guys on the field. Whether it's just the travel, or it's the schedule around it, it just wouldn't have made sense for them. And okay, the draw benefited them. They were able to put some guys on the bench they otherwise wouldn't, and that ends up providing an impetus. You also get just the general, I know this field. As it pertains to Seattle specifically, you get Louisville at home. That was essentially the back end of their bench, the guys that are game day scratches, and a bunch of next pro guys is sort of what they put out on that teeny tiny field, turf field in Tukwila. You guys have been around long enough to remember Tacoma Defiance when they were in the league and when they were Sounders too, playing at Starfire. So you know how compact that is. The stat that stood out to me as it relates to that is Seattle's played 26 games in the Open Cup at Starfire in their MLS era. They have lost 0 of them in the 90. 0.
Wow.
They have been ousted twice, once in extra time, once in penalties. That's it. It is the impossible job to go to Seattle and win in the Open Cup. So you dodge that bullet. Obviously, you're still going to be missing those 2 critical pieces in Cicerone and Roro. But in theory, hopefully, you've got Connor Donovan back. If you can sort of handle this month in the right way, or the month handles you the right way, I guess would be a better way to put it. You've got a realistic chance to go make a little bit of noise in that game. And Seattle being where they are in the league, given the way they've approached the Open Cup, especially with the lower division sides to this point, they get Louisville, then Phoenix, then you guys. I would be very surprised if suddenly Raul Ruidiaz pops up as a starter. Maybe even surprised if he lands on the bench. Maybe you're at the point in the final 8 where Brian Schmetzer starts to allocate more resources. But that's a club that expects to win in every competition. And right now in MLS, they're not doing that. So if they're going to get their kickstart into the second half of the year, that's going to be the point in time right before Leagues Cup where 3-6 points around it may define what the last 2.5 months of your season looks like. And so I would be very surprised to see the Open Cup garner more respect unless this goes totally off the rails for Seattle, which I don't see coming.
So very similar to, or you're thinking, if it goes Sporting KC in 2022, granted it's not a semifinal, where they were the in last place. This was their only chance to garner a Champions League spot. Then they make a real go for it. But if they're still hanging around in a playoff spot, then you believe they focus on league play. Is that kind of what your thought process is?
Yeah. I think they also have a great history with this specific trophy too, which is significant. Like I spoke to Brian Schmetzer about it, and this is about history. This is about, what we've done as a club. Of course, we respect the cup. I'm not saying any of that. It's more just, you can only stretch so far. And, I think maybe the quarters are the time where they start to make that approach. Then you've got another team like LAFC that's sort of saying the whole time that this is their road to Champions Cup, and it was always their focus to garner that one slot that comes out. So in which case they'd have to go to Sacramento potentially to go get it. So, yeah, I mean, it's going to come down to where they're at on July 1st. Right. They're going to have to sit down and go, okay, this is the next 2 weeks. How much can we actually give to this one game on the road at Sacramento?
All right, let's dive in a little bit. I want to know some of your thoughts around the USL Championship. For Sacramento, they're in an interesting position. A couple injuries you mentioned. I know Roro obviously out, which is devastating. Cicerone, I think when I spoke to him, now that he knows that date, I think he's gonna try and do all he can to get back for that. We'll see if that can actually happen. Sacramento looked a little fatigued on Saturday in a 0-0 draw against Birmingham, still undefeated. You got some injuries. Some guys are starting to get back healthy. You mentioned Herrera, Pirano. Where do you think Sacramento stands in terms of USL Championship? Where do you think they rank so far?
Yeah, so far you'd say top 3, top 4. I mean, obviously without a loss, handful of draws. You could argue the Rhode Island draw was a little bit of a gut punch, but you could also turn around and say the way that they got it was extremely valuable. And coming off the week that they were coming off of, and with the game that they had in front of them, you could say that's still a pretty decent result against a Rhode Island team that all the metrics say are better than their record.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, we're at the stage now. Like, I don't know that I trust any team in the league more to get a clean sheet if they had their backs against the wall than Sacramento, which puts you in every single game And I think there's enough attacking talent to sort of get through this stretch. I think they're going to have to learn a little bit more about themselves and what this looks like in the absence of those two guys. But Pirano's fairly electric, can cover some of that ground in wide areas in the attacking end that we see Rodrigo pick up sometimes, can come inside. Herrera and Ammon both give you different but electric looks at the 9 as well. Kieran Phillips was unreal in the first 50 minutes. I think he just ran out of gas, but he was wildly good. I spoke to one coach in the championship about who they'd put at the top, and they'd say, who do you look at who has no weaknesses? And I said, Sacramento. And he goes, yeah, Louisville and Charleston. Like, I think those are the three right now. It's not to say the way New Mexico has sprouted to the top isn't impressive. It's not to say Pittsburgh before the loss to Memphis this week wasn't impressive. Handful of other teams, certainly. But, like, the teams where I look at and just go, like, those guys are built for it, Sacramento, Louisville, Charleston, in some capacity would probably be my three.
I want to ask about the attack for Sacramento. So this is the first time, at least I can remember, where Sacramento has three strikers, forwards. You can include Cicerone in that category if you put four, where any of these guys can go in and score. Where in the past, it's been kind of one guy and maybe a half, 1.5. But now you have Ammon, who can come in and score. Kieran Phillips is so good. At least he's been really good so far. And then Herrera, who was good last year before being injured. Cicerone, we know how good he can be. So you have all these different guys, and it's like I don't think we've had the luxury in the past, and credit to Mark Briggs and Todd Donovan for putting this into position. Am I crazy for saying that in the past it's felt score by committee, and now it's a little more, hey, we actually got some guns up front, more than just 1.5?
Yeah, I spoke with Mark about this going into the San Jose game. What feels different about this particular squad that makes it more lethal? And that's exactly what he said. We lack the explosive goal scorer in multitude. We maybe had one. Now we've got 3 or 4, to your exact point. So certainly heard it from Mark. Kieran Phillips has been good enough. I've genuinely multiple times in that game thought, what the hell is he doing here? And I mean that in the kindest way. Like, that's the level he played at in that game. Sebastian Herrera is the interesting one to me because Mark has been so high on him for so long, and we've never gotten a chance to see the full run of games to see what this looks like for, and I don't mean 5 games, I mean like 15. I mean like half a year where you kind of go, okay, what's this look like with the full, let's call it 1,200 minutes of uninterrupted football. And let's see where he's at now. And I think we might get a shot at that. And I'm really intrigued because I can't remember very many big swings and misses from Todd and Mark.
Right.
They may not get exactly what they're looking for, but they rarely miss. And when I hear the kind of phrasing I heard around Sebastian Herrera, I went, okay, this one's a bigger swing than we're used to. So that's the one where I think you've got a bunch of guys who can score 10 goals in a season. That's impressive. Sebastian Herrera might be more than that, and I want to see that.
And Trevor Ammon, I think, he had such a blistering start that everyone's like, oh, this was our guy. And I don't think that, from my conversations, is that wasn't necessarily the plan. This was a guy who would be maybe that super sub, but he's been so good too. So now you're at a point where you have those 3 guys who, now your lineup decision gets tough. And then the creativity question comes into play because Roro is such a next level creator. Let's go, okay, where does that creativity come from? And I think that's what's going to be interesting really throughout the rest of the season. And even before Cicerone gets back, how does Sacramento find that creative piece? We know Jack Gurr down the right side. He'll do a lot of that, but a little more in the trenches, who is that going to be? And so that's what I'm most curious coming up in the next month. How does Sacramento figure out and redefine themselves in their creativity piece. Is that you think that's a fair point to make?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think if you lack someone who can do it without structure necessarily, then you need to create a structure that gets the best out of the pieces you have. And so when you mentioned Jack Gurr, Damia Villader coming back, Christian Pirano out of wide areas gives you a little bit of that flicker. This may become a little bit more of a crossing team than dice you up through lines kind of team out of necessity. It's not to say they don't have any pieces that can do that. Nick Ross, Luis Felipe, like we saw them hit line breaking passes in this game. But Rodrigo is a little bit of a different animal, even at 36, 37. So yeah, I mean, I think you're just gonna have to create it through a little more structure. I think the width will be a little more utilized. And we've seen the team do it before.
Right.
Like, it wasn't that long ago that Rodrigo was playing at RGV. So it's definitely a missing piece, but it's not one that I think will tank this season. I think it's going to be one that it's going to be a problem that will require a solution, though.
All right, final question for you. Have you gotten have you gotten your assignments for the next round?
I am going to Portugal with my wife.
Oh, are you really?
I am.
Good for you.
We looked at the whole schedule. That's the Olympic break for NWSL on Amazon Prime, which has me flying all over the place. So what I do with my time off is fly somewhere else. But that was the only thing between the NWSL's upcoming tournament with Liga MX. There's a ton of games for the championship at the end of July, start of August with CBS Sports Network, and ESPN2. Like the best 10-day window that caused me the least amount of pain was the one that included the Open Cup quarters. So I will be in Portugal with my wife, and I will keep tabs on Twitter with the time difference. I don't think they'll get me in any trouble. And then I'm going to chill out in Lisbon or Porto or something and do absolutely nothing.
Good for you, man. I'm going to be in Italy the next month. I don't know exactly when, but I do know exactly when, but later in August. But the way you set that up, though, is I thought you were coming. You like paused.
I know. I gave it to you. I will say I will be back in that region. I have never called a Republic game in person, and I am of the belief that might be changing.
Can we not talk about it?
Absolutely not.
Oh, okay.
No chance. Nope. But I do think I may finally get to experience a Republic game in person.
Okay. All right. Got it. Okay.
You're like, I'm just like leaving this as open-ended as possible. This is why you tune in.
Yeah.
This is what you asked for.
Well, listen, I know we got a lot of national games coming up in that region. So, that have been announced. So I won't, that's all we'll say.
Yeah.
That have been, So people will figure it out. I know. Yeah. The other one, I think you're right. I don't think it has been.
Nope.
So, you know your schedule on that stuff, on when it's been public and when it hasn't been. So,
I just know that I'm excited enough to know the date and not excited enough to out myself for knowing.
Fair.
But I'm super excited. I will hopefully see you in a couple months.
Yes, that sounds great. I will say I did have Mike Friedman text me that he may or may not be coming on the 9th. So July 9th.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I didn't realize that the quarters got that kind of love.
I know, me neither.
Wow. I love it.
So yeah, we'll see, man. We'll see. All right. So how mhave you counting how many games you've done this year so far?
That is like a 10-second figure out. Let's see. You also pay for this when you I'm doing my 89th Wednesday at Monterey Bay for CBS Sports Network. Monterey Bay and Charleston. 89.
Wow.
Of the calendar year. I'm projecting out to like 175 or 180, which to be fair is like a 25% drop, which was by design.
Good for you.
I know it sounds
say.
like I know it sounds like people have stopped hiring me, and that could also be accurate, but that's not the reason for this particular drop.
Did you get to do any Knicks games so far? Any Knicks games at the end?
I did not. So there were some rumors floating that if it had extended the season another round, that there may be an opening there. But did like the second to last or third to last game of the regular season, and then vamos, I was out.
Yeah.
We've got maybe the most unique public address announcer in the game at MSG, and to back him up, to learn how to utilize my voice in a different way, because he is so unlike every other public address announcer in the NBA, has been one of the coolest little personal professional journeys I've had.
Interesting. I could geek out about public address for another 10 minutes, but I don't think people care as much about that as
no,
as
that's
others.
a Joel Godet podcast for sure, but it's not this one.
I was waiting. I know you and Devin give a hard time to home teams when they do dumb things in stadium, and we didn't have a chance to do our dumb gimmick this year that we still haven't gotten in trouble with, knock on wood, where if the opposing team is milking the clock, we flat call it out with a cow moo on the video board, and we say, "This milking the clock by X and X team is presented by Crystal Creamery with a moo," and then our crowd starts to get into it.
Excellent. That is so good. That is so good. And it's a tough line to walk. I've been there, right? Like, I once suggested that a guy's ego had knocked him down and he had torn his hamstring. And that is a one-time mistake. That was like my first year of pro announcing, where it's like, yeah, you need to it looked innocuous, and then you read in the paper a week later that he's out for the season. You're like, that wasn't it.
Yeah, we had a couple games ago. We did one where the guy was stretching. That's a perfect example of when to do it. And then he got kicked in the foot, and I was like, oh, that happens, or stepped on, or whatever. And we did it, and then 2 minutes later, he gets subbed out in like the 26th minute, and I'm like, got to be careful. That's the only messed up. So now we're a little more hesitant. Any head injuries to no go.
Good.
We're finding our groove. But it's at the point now where Todd Donovan, our general manager and president, will just text me cow emojis when he's ready for it. Yeah.
Excellent. I love that it goes all the way to the top. This is great.
So,
oh my gosh. Are they going to do that at Huddersfield moving forward? Are they going to steal that?
I doubt it. I doubt it.
The European mind can't comprehend.
Huddersfield just wants Kieran back, I would imagine.
At this rate, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm looking at his history. I'm like, the guy got 5 games.
I know.
You gave this dude 5 games and then shipped him off on loan for years. I'm baffled.
I know he's been banged up, but
yeah.
I mean, his quality is his like composure. The first goal he scored was like a little chip over the keeper, like in traffic. And we're like, holy cow, who's this guy? And then he scored again off the bench, had a brace off the bench.
Mm-hmm.
And since then he's been unbelievable. So,
and I think he was out like an 18-month stretch. I mean, I get it. And yet he spent the last 2 years scoring in League One and League Two, where you're kind of like, okay, when's he going to get a shot? And then he comes here, and who knows, man? Maybe this is his big come up summer.
Who knows?
I hope so.
I know. Yeah, I know. It's gonna be interesting. I don't know the plans long term for him, but I would imagine Huddersfield fans are watching this after being relegated. They're probably going to want this guy back to try and help him get promoted, is what I would assume.
That's what I'm saying. He's on the books.
He's on the books. Oh man, Mike Watts. I said no longer than 20 minutes. We went 30, but this was a pleasure, man. Always great chatting with you. And you're the man. You're the best in the biz. And it's enjoy Portugal. We'll miss you on the call though. That July 9th game, but hopefully we'll see you maybe in the next round if Sacramento advances.
It would be my honor. Connor, appreciate you, and go Quails.
Appreciate you, brother. Go Quails.